The dust cloud rising from the dirt road announced her arrival before Olivia Fletcher's worn leather boots ever touched the ground. And Jack Irving watched from his porch with idle curiosity as the young woman climbed down from her weathered wagon, clutching a leather satchel to her chest like it held all the gold in California. It was spring of 1878 in Republic County, Kansas, and the late afternoon sun painted everything in shades of amber and rust. The ranch stretched out behind him, cattle lowing in the distance, while his foreman handled the evening routines without need for supervision. Jack had built this place from nothing over the past 8 years, turning raw prairie into something prosperous. And now, at 29 years old, he found himself restless in ways that cattle and land could not satisfy. The woman straightened her blue calico dress, dusty from travel, and pushed back a strand of dark auburn hair that had escaped her bun. She could not have been more than 23 or 24, Jack guessed, with fair skin touched by sun and eyes that held determination mixed with something else. Desperation, maybe, or grief. He had seen enough of both to recognize them when they crossed a person's face. She walked toward the main house with measured steps, her chin lifted despite the obvious exhaustion in her shoulders. Jack stood from his rocking chair, setting aside the leather tack he had been mending, and moved to the top of the porch steps. "Can I help you, miss?" He called out, keeping his voice level and polite. Women traveling alone were not uncommon in Kansas, but they were not exactly typical either, especially this far from town. "I hope so, sir," she replied, stopping at the base of his porch steps. Her voice carried a tremor of nervousness, but she met his gaze directly. "My name is Olivia Fletcher, and I am selling recipes. My mother's recipes, actually." She was known throughout Missouri for her cooking, and before she passed, she made me promise to share them with people who would appreciate good food. Jack felt a pang of sympathy at the mention of her mother's passing. He descended the steps slowly, studying her face more closely now. She had green eyes, he noticed, the color of new grass after spring rain, and a smattering of freckles across her nose that she had probably cursed her entire life. "Recipes," he repeated, not unkindly. "What kind of recipes are we talking about?" Olivia's face brightened slightly, hope flickering across her features. She opened her satchel and withdrew a stack of papers, each covered in careful, feminine handwriting. "Everything you could imagine. Bread recipes, meat preparations, preserves, desserts. My mother spent 40 years perfecting these. She ran a boarding house in Kansas City, and people came from 3 counties over just to taste her cooking." Jack took the offered papers, flipping through them with genuine interest. The recipes were detailed and specific, noting not just ingredients but techniques, timing, temperatures. His own mother had been a terrible cook, and after she died when he was 15, he had survived on burned stew and overdone beef for years until he could afford to hire a cook. Even now, his ranch cook was competent but uninspired, turning out the same basic meals day after day. "How much are you asking?" he inquired, his eyes still scanning the recipes. There was one for something called honey butter rolls that made his mouth water just reading the description. 50 cents per recipe," Olivia said, her voice steady despite the uncertainty in her eyes. "I know that might seem like a lot, but each one has been tested and perfected. They are worth every penny, I promise you that." Jack did some quick mathematics in his head. There appeared to be about 30 recipes in the stack he held. $15 was not a fortune, but for a woman selling papers door to door, it would represent significant income. He glanced up at her face again, noting the threadbare cuffs of her dress, the worn soles of her boots, the way her hands trembled slightly as she waited for his response. "I will take them all," he said simply. Olivia's eyes widened. All of them. You do not want to look through them more carefully first. Make sure they are things you would actually use. Miss Fletcher, I run a cattle ranch with 15 men who work sunrise to sunset. They eat the same rotating menu of beef, beans, and biscuits pretty much every day of their lives. If even half these recipes work out, it will be the best $15 I have spent all year. He paused, then added, Wait here a moment. Jack strode into the house, leaving Olivia standing in the yard looking somewhat stunned. He returned a minute later with a small leather pouch, counting out 15 silver dollars into her palm. Her hand closed around the money slowly, as if she could not quite believe what was happening. Thank you, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. You have no idea what this means to me. You got somewhere to stay tonight? Jack asked, surprising himself with the question. Republic is another 8 miles down the road and the sun is going to set soon. Olivia shook her head. I will manage. I have been camping along the road. That is not safe, Jack said flatly. I have a guest room. Nothing fancy, but it has a real bed and a lock on the door. My housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, lives in town, but she prepared supper before she left. You are welcome to stay the night. Get a fresh start in the morning. He watched the internal struggle play across Olivia's face. Accepting help from a stranger was risky, especially for a woman alone. But he could also see her exhaustion, the way her shoulders sagged now that the transaction was complete, as if she had been holding herself together through sheer force of will. I would not want to impose, she said carefully. Not an imposition, I insist, Jack gestured toward the house. Come on, you look like you could use a decent meal and a good night's rest. Olivia hesitated one more moment, then nodded. Thank you, Mr. Irving, Jack Irving, he smiled slightly, and you are welcome. She followed him into the house, and Jack found himself acutely aware of her presence in his space. The ranch house was well built but spartanly furnished, a bachelor's domain with little in the way of decorative touches. Olivia's gaze swept over the main room, taking in the stone fireplace, the heavy wooden furniture, the maps and ledgers stacked on his desk. The guest room is upstairs, first door on the right, Jack said, pointing toward the staircase. There is a wash basin and pitcher if you want to clean up. Supper will be ready in about 20 minutes. Thank you, Olivia said again, and there was such genuine gratitude in her voice that Jack felt something shift in his chest, a feeling he could not quite name. While she went upstairs, Jack moved to the kitchen and uncovered the dishes Mrs. Chen had left. Roasted chicken, boiled potatoes, and green beans, simple but well prepared. He set the table for two, something he had not done since his brother visited 3 years ago, and found himself wondering about Olivia Fletcher's story. What had brought her from Kansas City to the rural stretches of Republic County? Why was she selling her mother's recipes door to door instead of using them herself? Maybe opening a restaurant or boarding house like her mother had. When Olivia came back downstairs, she had washed her face and tidied her hair, though the tiredness still showed in her eyes. They sat across from each other at the worn oak table, and for a few minutes they ate in silence. Jack noticed that she ate slowly, carefully, savoring each bite as if she had not had a proper meal in days. She probably had not. Your mother, he said finally, breaking the quiet. When did she pass? Olivia's hand stilled on her fork. 3 months ago, February. It was pneumonia. She went quick, at least, did not suffer long. I am sorry for your loss. Thank you. Olivia took a sip of water, gathering her thoughts. She made me promise at the end that I would not let her recipes die with her, said they were her legacy more than any money or property. So I copied them all out, everything she ever made, and I set out to sell them. Figured I could make my way west, maybe end up in Colorado or California, start fresh somewhere new. Kansas City has opportunities, Jack observed. Must have been hard to leave. Olivia's expression darkened slightly. I was engaged. My mother's death. It changed things. He decided he did not want to marry a woman with no family, no dowry, no prospects. Called off the wedding 2 weeks after we buried her. Jack felt anger flash through him at the callousness of such an action. Then he was a fool. She looked up, surprised by the vehemence in his tone. Their eyes met across the table and something passed between them, a moment of connection that neither had expected. Olivia looked away first, color rising in her cheeks. I suppose I should have seen it coming, she said softly. Edward always cared more about appearances than substance, but it hurt nonetheless. They finished the meal with lighter conversation. Jack telling her about the ranch, the cattle market, the challenges of keeping a large operation running smoothly. Olivia listened with genuine interest, asking intelligent questions that showed she understood the business aspects, despite having no ranching experience herself. As the evening deepened and lamplight filled the house, Jack found himself reluctant to let the conversation end. There was something about Olivia Fletcher that drew him in, something beyond her obvious beauty. She had a resilience, a determination that reminded him of the settlers who had first come to Kansas, willing to face hardship for the chance at something better. Finally, Olivia stifled a yawn and apologized. I should let you get your rest. You have been more than kind already. The offer stands to stay as long as you need, Jack heard himself say, if you are in no hurry to move on. Olivia studied him with those green eyes, searching for something. Why are you being so generous to a stranger? Jack considered the question, wanting to be honest. I suppose because someone showed me kindness once, when I needed it most. My father died when I was 15, left my mother and me with nothing but debt. A rancher named Thomas Carlyle took me on, taught me everything about cattle, about the land, about building something that lasts. When he retired, he sold me this property for half what it was worth, told me to pay it forward someday. Maybe this is me doing that. The truth in his words hung in the air between them. Olivia nodded slowly, understanding passing across her face. Then I will stay tomorrow as well if the offer is genuine. It would be nice to rest for a day, maybe help earn my keep by cooking something from one of those recipes you just bought. Jack smiled, genuine and warm. I would like that very much. That night, lying in his bed, Jack stared at the ceiling and listened to the old house settling around him. Somewhere above, Olivia Fletcher slept in the guest room, and he found himself thinking about her story, her courage, the way lamplight had caught the auburn in her hair. He told himself it was just loneliness, the natural response of a solitary man to an attractive woman's presence. But even as he thought it, he knew it was something more. Morning came with the sound of roosters crowing and cattle beginning their daily routines. Jack rose early as always, dressing in work clothes and heading downstairs to find Olivia already in the kitchen, flour dusting her hands as she worked dough on the counter. Good morning, she said, looking up with a smile. I hope you do not mind. I found the ingredients for the honey butter rolls. Thought I would thank you properly for your hospitality. The kitchen smelled like heaven, warm and sweet and promising. Jack poured himself coffee and leaned against the doorframe, watching her work. She moved with practiced efficiency, her hands shaping the dough with the confidence of someone who had done this 1,000 times. My mother taught me to cook as soon as I could reach the counter, Olivia said, not looking up from her work. She said a woman who could feed people well would never want for friends or purpose. I think she was right about that. She sounds like she was a wise woman. She was. Olivia's voice grew soft. She came from nothing, you know. Her parents were immigrants, dirt poor. She worked in other people's kitchens from the time she was 8 years old, learning everything she could. When she married my father, they saved every penny until they could buy that boarding house. She made it successful through sheer force of will and good food. What happened to your father? Died in the war. Shiloh, 1862. I was just a baby, never knew him. Olivia shaped the last roll and set it on the pan. My mother never remarried, said she had loved once truly and that was enough for any lifetime. Jack pondered that as Olivia slid the rolls into the oven. The idea of loving someone so completely that you never wanted anyone else seemed both beautiful and tragic. He had never felt that way about anyone, though he had courted a few women over the years, nothing that ever took root deeply enough to become permanent. The rolls, when they emerged golden and steaming 40 minutes later, were the best thing Jack had ever tasted. The ranch hands who came in for breakfast stared at the spread Olivia had prepared with something close to religious awe. Along with the rolls, she had made eggs with herbs, fried potatoes with onions, and a gravy that made grown men close their eyes in appreciation. "Miss Fletcher," said Charlie Webb, Jack's foreman, "if the boss does not marry you by week's end, I surely will." The men laughed, but Jack felt heat creep up his neck. Olivia blushed prettily and swatted at Charlie with a dish towel. "Flatterer, but I am glad you enjoyed it." After breakfast, Jack found reasons to stay close to the house instead of riding out to the far pastures as he normally would. He told himself he was just being hospitable, making sure Olivia had everything she needed, but the truth was simpler and more complicated. He wanted to be near her. They spent the morning in companionable activity. Jack worked on his account books while Olivia organized the kitchen, making lists of supplies that would be needed to prepare more of her mother's recipes. She hummed while she worked, old songs that Jack half remembered from his childhood, and the sound filled the house with a warmth it had never held before. Around midday, Olivia ventured out to the garden behind the house, a neglected plot that Mrs. Chen kept threatening to revive but never found time for. Jack watched from the window as Olivia knelt in the dirt, examining the soil, pulling weeds, her face thoughtful. He went out to join her, standing at the garden's edge. "Not much to look at, I am afraid." "It has potential," Olivia said, brushing dirt from her hands. "Good soil, plenty of sun. You could grow vegetables here, herbs. Fresh ingredients make all the difference in cooking. I would not know where to start." Olivia looked up at him, shading her eyes against the sun. "I could help if you wanted. I mean, I know I said I was moving on, but—" She trailed off, uncertainty crossing her face. Jack's heart beat faster. "Stay." "What? Stay here? Not just for another day or two?" "Stay and cook for the ranch, help with the garden, use those recipes your mother left you." The words tumbled out before he could second-guess them. "I will pay you fair wages, give you your own room, complete independence. The men would work twice as hard for decent food, and you would have time to rest, to figure out your next step without being on the road alone." Olivia stood slowly, her green eyes searching his face. "Why would you offer that?" "Because you clearly need a safe place to land, and I need someone who can cook worth a damn," Jack said bluntly. Then, more softly, "and because I would like you to stay, if I am being honest." The honesty hung between them, raw and unadorned. Olivia's expression shifted through several emotions too quickly for Jack to read. Finally, she nodded. "All right, I will stay at least for a while, see how it works out." Relief flooded through Jack stronger than he expected. "Good. That is good." They stood in the scraggly garden, the Kansas wind blowing around them, carrying the scent of prairie grass and cattle and possibility. Jack had the strange sensation that his life had just changed direction, pivoting on this moment in ways he could not yet comprehend. The days that followed fell into a rhythm that felt natural, despite being entirely new. Olivia took over the kitchen completely, transforming the ranch's meals from merely adequate to genuinely excellent. She worked through her mother's recipes systematically, preparing dishes that had the ranch hands singing her praises. Word spread to neighboring ranches, and soon Jack found himself fielding questions from other ranchers about his new cook. But it was more than just the food. Olivia brought life to the ranch house in ways Jack had not anticipated. She sang while she worked, filled vases with wildflowers, opened windows to let in fresh air and sunshine. The house, which had always felt like just a place to sleep between long days of work, began to feel like a home. For her part, Olivia seemed to blossom in the safety and stability of the ranch. The haunted look gradually faded from her eyes, replaced by something brighter. She laughed more easily, especially when Charlie and the other hands teased her gently. She started the garden in earnest, planting vegetables and herbs, talking excitedly about what they would be able to harvest come summer. And through it all, Jack found himself drawn to her more each day. It was not just attraction, though he certainly felt that. It was the way she hummed old hymns while kneading bread. The way she listened intently when he talked about ranch problems, often offering surprisingly insightful suggestions. The way she read by lamplight in the evenings, curled up in the armchair he had dragged in from the barn and cleaned up for her, completely absorbed in whatever book she had borrowed from his modest collection. 2 weeks after Olivia's arrival, Jack rode into Republic to pick up supplies and found himself in the general store, staring at a display of women's dresses. Sarah Mitchell, who ran the store with her husband, noticed his interest and approached with a knowing smile. "Something I can help you with, Jack. Just looking," he said, feeling foolish. "That blue one would look lovely with auburn hair," Sarah observed casually. "And it is good quality fabric, would last through hard wear." Jack looked at the dress she indicated, a simple but well-made garment in a shade of blue that would indeed complement Olivia's coloring. "How much? For you? $3. It was more than he should spend on a whim, but Jack found himself agreeing anyway. Sarah wrapped the dress carefully while he gathered the other supplies on his list, including several items Olivia had specifically requested for recipes she wanted to try. The ride back to the ranch seemed longer than usual, and Jack felt nervous in a way he had not since he was a teenage boy. What if Olivia thought the dress was inappropriate? What if she read too much into the gesture, or not enough? He considered turning around and returning it half a dozen times, but kept riding forward. He found Olivia in the garden, checking on seedlings that had just begun to sprout. She stood when she saw him, brushing dirt from her skirt, her face lighting up in greeting. Jack's heart did something complicated in his chest. "How was town?" she asked as he dismounted. "Fine. Got everything on your list." He hesitated, then pulled the wrapped dress from his saddlebag. "And I saw this. Thought you might like it, as a thank you for everything you have done around here." Olivia took the package slowly, unwrapping it with careful fingers. When she saw the dress, her breath caught. "Jack, this is too much. You are already paying me wages." "I know, but I wanted to. Your other dresses are getting worn, and I just thought." He trailed off, feeling heat creep up his neck. "If you do not like it, Sarah will take it back." "I love it," Olivia said softly, holding the dress up against herself. "It is beautiful, thank you." Their eyes met, and in that moment, Jack knew he was falling in love with her. Maybe had been falling since that first evening when she stood in his yard, dusty and determined, clutching her mother's recipes like treasures. The realization should have scared him, but instead it felt right, as natural as the Kansas sunrise. Olivia seemed to sense the shift in the air between them. Color rose in her cheeks, and she looked away first, carefully folding the dress. I should get cleaned up. I am making chicken and dumplings tonight, and I want to start the dough soon. Olivia, Jack said, and she paused. Would you have supper with me tonight? I mean, not just eating at the same table like usual, but actually with me. Properly. She understood what he was asking, what he was suggesting. A small smile curved her lips. I would like that. That evening felt different from all the others that had come before. Olivia wore the new blue dress, and Jack changed into his best shirt, the one he saved for church and important occasions. They ate by candlelight, talking about everything and nothing, the conversation flowing easily but charged with new awareness. Tell me about when you first came here, Olivia said. You mentioned Thomas Carlyle helped you, but what made you want to ranch in Kansas specifically? Jack leaned back in his chair, remembering. After my father died, my mother tried to make a go of our place in Missouri, but the debt was too much. When she passed a year later, I had nothing. I was 16 and angry at the world. Thomas found me trying to steal one of his horses, if you can believe that. Instead of having me arrested, he offered me a job, said I looked like I needed a purpose more than a jail cell. He sounds like a good man. The best I ever knew. He taught me that land is not just dirt and grass, it is legacy. What you build on it, how you tend it, that outlasts you. When he sold me this place, he said, Jack, make something here that matters. Something that will still be standing when you are old and gray. I have been trying to do that ever since. Olivia reached across the table, her hand covering his. The touch sent electricity through Jack's entire body. I think you have succeeded. This ranch, the way you treat your men, the life you have built, it all matters. Jack turned his hand over, lacing his fingers through hers. It has felt more meaningful these past few weeks, having you here. It has felt meaningful for me too, Olivia admitted. I have spent so much of my life taking care of my mother, which I do not regret. But after she died and Edward left, I felt lost. Coming here, having a purpose again, it has helped me remember who I am beyond just someone's daughter or someone's intended wife. They sat like that, hands linked across the table, the candles burning low. Finally, Jack stood, still holding her hand, and gently pulled her to her feet. They stood close, so close Jack could see the flecks of gold in her green eyes. I know it has only been a few weeks, he said quietly. And I know you came here with other plans, but I have to tell you, Olivia Fletcher, I am falling in love with you. Have been since the moment you walked into my yard with those recipes and that determined look on your face. Olivia's breath hitched. Jack, you do not have to say anything back. I just needed you to know. Needed you to understand that if you stay, it is not just as a cook, not anymore, at least not for me. Olivia raised her free hand to his face, her palm soft against his jaw. I am falling in love with you too. It terrifies me how fast this has happened, but I cannot deny it. When I am with you, I feel safe and seen in ways I never did with Edward, in ways I did not know were possible. Jack pulled her closer, giving her every opportunity to pull away, but she came willingly into his arms. When he kissed her, it felt like coming home and setting out on an adventure all at once. She tasted like cinnamon and sugar, and her arms wrapped around his neck as she kissed him back with equal fervor. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jack rested his forehead against hers. Stay forever, not as an employee, as my wife. Marry me, Olivia. Olivia laughed, a sound of pure joy. That is quite possibly the fastest proposal in Kansas history. I do not care about history. I care about the future, our future. Say yes. Yes, Olivia whispered. Yes, Jack Irving, I will marry you. They kissed again, and the ranch house, which had stood so quietly alone on the Kansas prairie for so many years, seemed to settle around them with satisfaction. as if it too had been waiting for this moment. The next few weeks passed in a blur of planning and preparation. Jack wanted to marry Olivia as soon as possible, not because he feared she would change her mind, but because now that he had found her, every day without her as his wife felt like wasted time. Olivia agreed, practical as always, pointing out that there was no reason to wait months for a ceremony when they were both certain of their feelings. They were married on a Sunday morning in late June, in the small church in Republic. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt, attended by the ranch hands, neighbors and townsfolk who had heard about the whirlwind romance and wanted to witness it. Charlie served as Jack's best man, while Sarah Mitchell stood up with Olivia, having become fast friends with the bride during shopping trips to town. Olivia wore a cream-colored dress that Sarah had helped her select, with lace at the collar and cuffs. Jack wore his best suit, and when he saw Olivia walking down the aisle toward him, her green eyes shining with happiness, he had to blink back unexpected tears. Reverend Matthews conducted the ceremony with warmth and humor, acknowledging that, while the courtship had been brief, he had seen enough couples in his 40 years of ministry to recognize genuine love when it stood before him. "Do you, Jack Irving, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, until death do you part?" "I do," Jack said firmly, his eyes never leaving Olivia's face. "And do you, Olivia Fletcher, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, until death do you part?" "I do," Olivia said, her voice clear and certain. "Then, by the power vested in me by the state of Kansas and Almighty God, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Jack, you may kiss your bride." Jack did thoroughly, to the applause and cheers of everyone gathered. When they broke apart, both were smiling so broadly it almost hurt. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and food enough to feed the entire county. Olivia had spent days preparing, working through her mother's recipes with loving care, and the result was a feast that people would talk about for years. There was roasted beef and chicken, fresh bread, vegetable dishes from the garden that was now flourishing, and pies of every description. As the sun set and lanterns were lit, someone produced a fiddle and another man a guitar, and dancing began in the yard. Jack led Olivia in the first dance, holding her close as they swayed to a simple waltz. "Happy," he murmured into her ear. "Happier than I ever thought possible," she replied honestly. "4 months ago my mother had just died, my engagement had ended, and I had no idea what my future held. Now look at me. I am married to a wonderful man, I have a beautiful home, a purpose. It feels like a dream." "If it is a dream, I never want to wake up," Jack said, spinning her gently. They danced until the stars came out, surrounded by well-wishers and friends, the Kansas night warm and perfect around them. When the last guest had finally departed and the ranch hands had retreated to the bunkhouse, Jack carried Olivia over the threshold of their home, both of them laughing at the old-fashioned gesture. That night, they came together as husband and wife, and the love between them was as natural and right as breathing. Olivia fit in Jack's arms like she had been made for them, and when they finally fell asleep, tangled together in the marriage bed, both felt the bone-deep certainty that they had found exactly what they were meant to find in each other. The months that followed were some of the happiest of Jack's life. He had always enjoyed ranching, taken satisfaction in the work and the results it produced, but now every success felt sweeter because he had Olivia to share it with. She took genuine interest in the ranch operations, learning about cattle and markets, offering her perspective on decisions that needed to be made. The garden flourished under her care, providing fresh vegetables that elevated her cooking even further. She began preserving and canning, preparing for the winter months ahead. The pantry filled with jars of pickles, jams, preserved fruits, and vegetables, all labeled in her neat handwriting. In August, Jack bought 3 milk cows from a neighboring ranch, and Olivia learned to make butter and cheese, adding yet another dimension to the ranch's meals. Charlie joked that they were all going to get too fat to sit a horse properly if she kept cooking so well. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Jack rose early each morning and spent a few minutes just watching Olivia sleep, still amazed that she was his wife. They would have breakfast together before he headed out for the day's work, and he always returned to the house for lunch, unwilling to go too long without seeing her. Evenings were spent together, talking about their days, making plans for the future, simply enjoying each other's company. In September, Olivia started feeling ill in the mornings. At first, she attributed it to something she had eaten, but when it persisted for a week, Sarah Mitchell, who had stopped by for a visit, took one look at her and smiled knowingly. "Olivia, honey, I think you might be expecting." Olivia's hand went to her stomach, her eyes widening. "But we have only been married 3 months." "That is more than enough time," Sarah said gently. "The timing, the symptoms, I have seen it enough times to recognize it. You should see Doc Harrison, get it confirmed proper." Olivia did, and the doctor confirmed what Sarah had suspected. She was indeed pregnant, likely due in early April. Olivia rode home from town in a daze, her hand pressed to her still flat stomach, trying to process the news. A baby. She was going to be a mother. When Jack came in that evening, Olivia was in the kitchen, ostensibly preparing supper but mostly just standing at the counter, lost in thought. He came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and kissing her neck. "You are quiet tonight. Everything all right?" Olivia turned in his arms, looking up at his face, memorizing this moment. "I have news. I hope it is good news, though it is sooner than we might have planned." Jack's brow furrowed in concern. "What is it?" "We are going to have a baby. In April." For a moment, Jack just stared at her, processing. Then his face broke into the widest smile she had ever seen. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. "A baby! We are having a baby, we are," Olivia confirmed, laughing too, though tears were streaming down her face. "Are you happy?" "Happy, Olivia, I am thrilled, terrified but thrilled." He set her down gently, suddenly careful, his hand going to her stomach. "Is it all right? Are you all right?" "I am fine. Tired and a bit queasy in the mornings, but Doc Harrison says that is normal. Everything is progressing as it should." That night, they lay in bed, Jack's hand splayed across Olivia's stomach, talking about the future. Names, nursery arrangements, how they would manage the ranch and a baby, all the practical and impractical considerations that came with impending parenthood. "My mother would have loved this," Olivia said softly. "Would have loved knowing her recipes brought me here to you, to this life we are building. I wish she could have met you." "I wish that too," Jack said, "but in a way she is part of this. If she had not made you promise to share those recipes, you never would have come to my door. We probably never would have met. So everything we have, everything we are building, it started with her. Our children will know that. They will know their grandmother's legacy." Olivia cried then. Tears of grief and joy mixed together, and Jack held her through it all, this woman who had brought so much life and love into his world. Winter came to Kansas with its usual bite, but the ranch house stayed warm and welcoming. Olivia's pregnancy progressed well, despite the discomfort of morning sickness that sometimes lasted well into the afternoon. By January, she was showing clearly, her dresses straining across her expanding belly. Jack watched the changes in her body with awe, marveling at the miracle of it all. The ranch hands treated Olivia like precious china, constantly trying to help with tasks she was perfectly capable of doing herself. She tolerated it with good humor, understanding that they cared about her and wanted to help. Charlie, in particular, appointed himself her unofficial guardian, appearing any time she ventured outside to ensure she was all right. "You are all going to drive me crazy before this baby arrives," Olivia declared one afternoon in February, when 3 different men had rushed to help her carry a relatively light basket of laundry. "Better crazy than sorry," Charlie retorted. "Boss would have our heads if anything happened to you or that baby." Jack, overhearing this exchange, grinned. "Damn right I would." In March, with the baby's arrival imminent, Jack hired a woman from Republic to come stay at the ranch. Mrs. Dorothy Sullivan was a widow with grown children who had assisted with dozens of births over the years. She moved into the guest room and immediately began organizing the house for the impending event, working with Olivia to prepare everything that would be needed. "First babies can take their time," Mrs. Sullivan warned. "Do not be surprised if this little one is late," but their child proved eager to meet the world. On April 3rd, 2 weeks before the doctor had predicted, Olivia woke Jack in the middle of the night with a hand on his shoulder. "Jack, it is time." He sat bolt upright, instantly alert and terrified. "Time, now, but it is too early." "Babies come when they come," Olivia said, remarkably calm considering the circumstances. "Get Mrs. Sullivan and send Charlie for the doctor." The next 12 hours were the longest of Jack's life. He was banished from the bedroom, left to pace the main room while Mrs. Sullivan and eventually Doc Harrison attended to Olivia. He could hear her through the walls during the worst of it, crying out in pain, and it took every ounce of his self-control not to burst through the door. Charlie and 2 other hands stayed with him, trying to distract him with conversation, but Jack could focus on nothing but what was happening upstairs. Finally, as the sun was setting, he heard it. A baby's cry, strong and healthy. Jack's knees went weak with relief. Moments later, Mrs. Sullivan appeared at the top of the stairs, smiling broadly. "You have a son, Mr. Irving, a big, healthy boy, and your wife is doing just fine." Jack took the stairs 3 at a time. The bedroom was warm and bright with lamplight, and there was Olivia, propped up against pillows, her hair damp with sweat, holding a bundle wrapped in blankets. She looked exhausted but radiant. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Jack approached the bed slowly, almost reverently. Olivia pulled back the blanket, revealing a tiny red face, eyes squinted shut, one small fist waving in the air. Jack had never seen anything so perfect in his entire life. "Can I?" he asked, and Olivia carefully transferred the baby to his arms. Jack held his son, this tiny person who was half him and half Olivia, and felt his eyes fill with tears. "Hello," he whispered. "I am your father, and I promise you I am going to do my best to be a good one." The baby yawned, a comically large expression on such a small face, and then settled against Jack's chest as if he had always belonged there. "What should we name him?" Olivia asked, watching her 2 favorite people with love shining in her eyes. They had discussed names endlessly over the past months, never quite settling on anything. But now, looking at his son, Jack knew, "James, after your father, James Fletcher Irving." Olivia's face crumpled, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "Really? Really? Your father died before you could know him, but his legacy is here in you and our son. It feels right." "James," Olivia repeated, testing the name. "Jamie. Yes, I love it." Doc Harrison finished examining both mother and baby, declaring them both healthy and strong. "You did good, Mrs. Irving." He is a fine boy, should give you no trouble at all. That prediction proved wildly optimistic. Baby James had strong lungs and an apparently insatiable appetite. The first few weeks were a blur of sleepless nights and endless feedings. Jack did what he could to help, walking the floor with Jamie when he was fussy, changing soiled cloths, anything to ease Olivia's burden. But despite the exhaustion, they were happy. Watching Olivia with their son, seeing the fierce love in her eyes as she nursed him, Jack fell in love with her all over again. She was an excellent mother, patient and loving, somehow managing to keep the household running even while caring for a demanding newborn. The ranch hands doted on Jamie shamelessly. Charlie carved him a small wooden horse, and the other men took turns stopping by the house to peek at the baby, speaking to him in soft voices entirely at odds with their rough exteriors. As spring turned to summer, Jamie grew and thrived. He was a happy baby, quick to smile, fascinated by everything around him. Jack would sit with him for hours, telling him stories about the ranch, about his grandmother who he would never meet but whose recipes had brought his parents together, about all the things they would do together as Jamie grew older. One evening in July, as they sat on the porch together watching the sunset, Jamie sleeping peacefully in Olivia's arms, Jack looked at his family and felt a contentment so deep it almost hurt. "What are you thinking?" Olivia asked, noticing his expression. "That I am the luckiest man in Kansas," Jack said simply. "That 10 months ago I did not even know you existed, and now I cannot imagine my life without you, without this." He gestured to encompass the ranch, the baby, everything they had built together. Olivia reached over and took his hand. "I was just thinking something similar. How strange life is, how one decision can change everything. If I had not decided to sell those recipes, if I had gone a different direction that day, if you had not been home when I arrived, none of this would exist." "But you did, and I was, and here we are," Jack said. "Everything happened exactly as it was supposed to." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the Kansas sky in shades of orange and pink. In the distance, cattle lowed, settling for the night. The garden Olivia had planted was lush and green, promising a bountiful harvest. The house behind them was warm and welcoming, filled with the evidence of their life together. Years passed in this fashion, full and rich. Jamie grew into a bright, energetic boy who loved the ranch with the same passion his father did. When he was 3, Olivia gave birth to a daughter they named Clara Rose, a tiny, delicate thing who nonetheless had a will of iron from her first breath. 2 years after that came another son, Thomas, named for the man who had given Jack his start in ranching. The house, which had once seemed so empty and silent, was now constantly filled with noise and chaos. Children running through the halls, laughing and playing. The kitchen where Olivia had first won Jack's heart with honey butter rolls was now frequently invaded by small helpers, eager to learn the recipes that had become family legend. Jack taught his sons to ride and rope, to understand the land and the cattle. Clara, despite being the only daughter, proved just as capable as her brothers, and Jack never made the mistake of treating her any differently. Olivia made sure all 3 children knew how to cook, passing down her mother's recipes along with the stories behind them. "Your great-grandmother, Mary Fletcher, was an extraordinary woman," she would tell them as they worked together in the kitchen. "She came from nothing and built something wonderful through hard work and determination. These recipes are not just food, they are her legacy. And through them, through the love and care she put into them, she brought your father and me together. She made our family possible." The children grew up knowing they were loved, understanding the value of hard work, appreciating the home and life their parents had built. Jamie proved to have a head for the business side of ranching, while Thomas shared his father's passion for the land itself. Clara, bright and determined, declared at age 8 that she was going to be a veterinarian, and no one doubted she would achieve exactly that. The recipe books, those precious pages that Olivia had carried in her leather satchel all those years ago, were carefully preserved and added to over the years. Olivia had continued her mother's tradition, noting variations, new recipes, improvements. The books sat in a place of honor in the kitchen, consulted regularly, treasured as the artifacts they were. Neighbors often asked Olivia to teach them her cooking methods, and she did so gladly, just as her mother had once shared her knowledge. The Irving Ranch became known not just for its quality cattle, but for the meals that emerged from its kitchen, for the hospitality extended to all who visited. Jack and Olivia grew older together, silver threading through their hair, lines forming at the corners of their eyes from years of squinting into the Kansas sun. But their love, that spark that had ignited so quickly all those years ago, never dimmed. If anything, it grew stronger, deepened by shared experiences, by the life they had built together. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Jack surprised Olivia with a trip to Kansas City. It was the first time she had been back since leaving to sell her mother's recipes, and emotions overwhelmed her as they walked the familiar streets. "I want to see the boarding house," she said, "where I grew up." They found it still standing, now run by a different family, but well-maintained and clearly thriving. The new owners, recognizing Olivia's name when she introduced herself, invited them in with enthusiasm. "Mrs. Irving, your mother was famous in these parts," the current owner, a Mrs. Peterson, said. "When we bought this place, people still talked about her cooking. We found some of her old recipe cards tucked in the kitchen, have been using them for years. The guests love them." Olivia's eyes filled with tears. She would be so pleased to know her recipes are still being used, still bringing joy to people. That evening, as they sat in their hotel room, Olivia turned to Jack. "Thank you for bringing me here, for helping me remember where I came from, even as we have built our life together." "Your mother's legacy lives on," Jack said, pulling her close. "In those recipes, yes, but more importantly in you, in our children, in the values and love you passed down. She would be so proud of you, Olivia. I know I am." They returned to the ranch refreshed and reconnected, ready for whatever the future held. Jamie was 20 now, taking on more and more responsibility for the ranch's operations. In another year or two, Jack knew he would be ready to take over completely. The thought of retirement held appeal, the idea of spending his days with Olivia, maybe traveling, certainly spoiling whatever grandchildren their children eventually provided. Clara, true to her word, had gone east to study veterinary medicine, one of the few women in her program. She wrote long letters home, filled with her studies and experiences, and Jack and Olivia read them aloud to each other, pride swelling in their hearts. Thomas, now 15, was already as tall as his father and showed every sign of being a natural rancher. On a warm evening in late summer, the entire family gathered for supper. Jamie had brought his new wife, Elizabeth, a sweet-natured girl from a neighboring ranch. Clara was home for a visit between terms. Thomas entertained them all with stories about his recent cattle drive. The table was laden with food prepared from Mary Fletcher's recipes, including those honey butter rolls that had started everything. Looking around the table at the faces of his children and daughter-in-law, at his wife who still made his heart race after all these years, Jack felt a profound sense of gratitude. This life, this family, it all traced back to that spring day in 1878 when a determined young woman had knocked on his door, selling her mother's recipes. "I want to propose a toast," Jack said, standing and raising his glass. To Mary Fletcher, who I never had the privilege of meeting, but who brought us all together through her recipes and her wisdom. May we never forget that the best things in life, the things that truly matter, are the connections we make with each other, the love we share, and the legacies we leave behind. To Mary Fletcher, everyone echoed, raising their glasses. Olivia caught Jack's eye across the table, and the look that passed between them needed no words. It was love, pure and simple, tested by time and made stronger for it. It was gratitude for all they had been given and all they had built together. It was the satisfaction of a life well lived. After supper, as the evening deepened and children and grandchildren-in-law finally departed to their own beds, Jack and Olivia sat on the porch as they had done countless times before. The Kansas night was alive with cricket song and distant coyote calls. The ranch spread out before them, peaceful and prosperous. "You ever regret it?" Jack asked suddenly. "Coming here, staying, all the roads not taken?" Olivia looked at him in genuine surprise. "Regret?" "Jack Irving, marrying you and building this life has been the greatest adventure of my existence. I would not change a single moment, not even the hard parts. The times when money was tight, or I was too focused on the ranch, or the children were sick, or any of the 1,000 difficulties we have faced. Especially not those parts," Olivia said firmly. "Because those are the moments that tested us and proved that what we have is real and lasting. Easy lives do not build strong marriages. Working through challenges together, that is what makes love deep and true." Jack pulled her close, and they sat together under the stars, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful. The house behind them held 3 generations of love and memory. The land around them represented years of hard work and careful stewardship, and in the kitchen, carefully preserved, sat the recipe books that had started it all. Time continued its steady march. Jamie and Elizabeth welcomed their first child, making Jack and Olivia grandparents. Clara finished her studies and returned to Kansas, setting up a veterinary practice that served ranches throughout the county. Thomas married a teacher from Republic and brought her home to the ranch. Jack gradually stepped back from active management of the ranch, turning more and more over to Jamie. He found he enjoyed the slower pace, the opportunity to spend time with his grandchildren, teaching them to ride and sharing stories of their family history. Olivia continued to cook, though now she often had daughters-in-law and grandchildren in the kitchen with her, passing down recipes and techniques, just as her mother had once done with her. On a spring morning in 1905, Jack woke to find Olivia already up, standing at the bedroom window, looking out at the ranch in the early light. He joined her, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, his voice still rough from sleep. "About how far we have come," Olivia replied softly. "It has been 27 years since I knocked on your door. 27 years and not a day of it wasted. We have built something real here, Jack, something that will outlast us. Your mother would be proud," Jack said. "Of you, of what you have done with her legacy." "I like to think so." Olivia turned in his arms, looking up at his face. He was 56 now, weathered by years of Kansas sun and wind, but to her, he was as handsome as the day they met. "I love you, Jack Irving. Thank you for buying all my recipes that day. Thank you for seeing me, for asking me to stay, for building this life with me." "Thank you for knocking on my door," Jack replied, kissing her softly. "Best $15 I ever spent." They laughed together, as they had laughed together through 27 years of marriage. Below them, the ranch was waking up, a new day beginning. Grandchildren would soon arrive, filling the house with noise and life. Jamie would stop by to discuss ranch business. Clara might come to check on a sick horse. Thomas and his wife would join them for supper. The life they had built together continued, rich and full, exactly as it was meant to be. And in the kitchen, the recipe book sat ready, waiting to be consulted, to share their wisdom with another generation. Mary Fletcher's legacy lived on, not just in ingredients and instructions, but in the love that had grown from her gift, in the family that had flourished because one young woman had honored her mother's dying wish. Years later, when Jack was 63 and Olivia was 58, they celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary with a large gathering. Children, grandchildren, friends and neighbors filled the ranch house and spilled out into the yard. The celebration lasted all day, with food and music and stories shared. As the evening wound down, Olivia stood and asked for everyone's attention. When the crowd quieted, she spoke, her voice carrying clearly in the summer air. 30 years ago, I came to this ranch with nothing but a leather satchel full of my mother's recipes and hope for a better future. I was broken-hearted and alone, unsure of what my life would hold. But Jack Irving saw past my circumstances to the person I was and could become. He bought every recipe I had and asked if there were more. He gave me a place to stay, a purpose, and eventually his heart. Everything we have, this family, this legacy, it all started with those recipes and with Jack's kindness. So I want to thank him, publicly, for changing my life in the best possible way. The crowd applauded, and Jack, embarrassed by the attention but deeply moved, stood to join his wife. He took her hands, looking into eyes that still held the same determination and strength he had first noticed all those years ago. "The truth is," Jack said, his voice thick with emotion, "I am the one who should be thanking you. You brought life to this ranch, to my heart, to everything. Those recipes were just paper and ink until you made them real, until you shared not just your mother's cooking but her spirit, her determination, her capacity for love. You made this house a home. You gave me children and grandchildren. You stood beside me through droughts and hard winters and cattle market crashes. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Olivia Irving, and I would buy those recipes again every single day if it meant getting to spend my life with you." They kissed, to the cheers and applause of everyone gathered, and when they broke apart, both had tears streaming down their faces. Their children and grandchildren crowded around them, hugging and laughing and crying. This family that existed because of recipes and kindness and love that had grown deeper than either Jack or Olivia had ever imagined possible. As the sun set on the ranch that evening, painting the Kansas sky in brilliant colors, Jack and Olivia sat on their porch one more time, watching their family celebrate below. They held hands, their fingers intertwined as they had been for 3 decades, two people who had taken a chance on each other and won everything that mattered. The ranch would continue after them. Jamie would carry it forward and his children after him. Mary Fletcher's recipes would be passed down through generations, a tangible link to the past and the love that had grown from them. And somewhere in the great sweep of history, in the story of the American West and all the people who had built lives on the prairie, there would be this footnote, this small but perfect tale of how a woman selling her mother's recipes door to door met a rancher who bought them all and asked for more, and together they built something that would last forever. The end.